So I know some folks are going to be joining us both online and both here in person, but I just want to get us started. My name is Patty Robinson. I am the Faculty Director of Civic and Community Engagement at College of the Canyons, located in Santa Clarita, California. And I am joined by my colleague, Kimberly Rosenfeld, who is at Cerritos College here in Southern California. And so we are delighted today that we are holding our Civic Dialogue series. And this series today is a little bit different, or I should say this session is a little bit different than anything we've ever done before. This is actually a hybrid event. And we are so happy today to talk about the Carnegie classification. And we have Marisol and Lauren, who will be introduced in just a moment by Kimberly, who are here in person at College of the Canyons, and then we are welcoming folks literally from around the country. So we are really happy to see everyone here today. What I would like to do is give you just a little bit of the history of this event, because again, this is a hybrid of our planned Civic Dialogue series. We have been doing the Civic Dialogue series now for going into our 5th semester, and we have partnered with 3CSN, and a big thank you to Keelan Koenig and Rebecca Moonstone, who have been huge participants in helping us with tech issues and whatnot with our program. Civic Dialogues began in fall 2020 as part of a Bringing Theory to Practice grant that was an intersegmental partnership between 2 community colleges here in California, along with 2 of the 4-year colleges at the state college level. Since then, we've been happy enough or lucky enough to get another Bringing Theory to Practice grant. And so we are now partnering not only College of the Canyons Cerritos, but also LA City with CSU Dominguez Hills, CSUN or CSU Northridge, and CSU Los Angeles. When we were finishing our first grant, we were going to have an in-person event, but COVID obviously squelched that, and we had to decide what we were going to do. And we quickly shifted to an online speakers series. What we thought was probably going to last 1 semester is now into its 5th semester. And this was one way that we saw of bringing civic and community engagement to a larger audience, certainly in California among our community college system. Our idea was to bring some of the most spectacular, I should say, speakers, practitioners, and researchers in the field of civic and community engagement to this platform. And that is exactly what we've done. We've had just an incredible array of speakers. And again, we are so welcome today to talk about the Carnegie Elective classification for community engagement. So just to let you know, all of these recordings are available on the 3CSN YouTube channel. And today's recording or today's presentation will be recorded. And just as a sort of roundup, before I turn it over to Kimberly to introduce our guest, we have 3 guiding frameworks of our Civic Dialogue series. We are attempting to advance understanding of the intersection between equity, agency, civic engagement as a way to promote the public good. We also are doing our best to recognize civic, community, and democratic engagement as a high-impact practice for guided pathways and student success. And lastly, we are also doing our best to leverage participants' current knowledge to build capacity to innovate for local and global change. And with that, I'm going to move it over to Kimberly, who's going to introduce Marisol and Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Patty, and welcome. So I'm going to start with Dr. Marisol Morales, and I'll try to be brief here. Dr. Morales is the Executive Director of the Carnegie Elective Classifications at the American Council on Education, providing conceptual leadership and operational oversight to the elective classifications work. Prior to this role, she was the Vice President of Network Leadership at Campus Compact, and that was from 2018 to 2022. She was the founding director of the Office of Civic and Community Engagement at the University of La Verne, close to us here, from 2013 to 2018, and the associate director of the Steens Center for Community-Based Service Learning and Community Service Studies at DePaul University from 2005 to 2013. Dr. Morales serves as an adjunct faculty in the Enlace Higher Education Master's Program at Northeastern Illinois University and sits on the editorial board of the Michigan Journal of Community Service Learning, the editorial advisory board of Liberal Education, a publication of the Association of American Colleges and Universities, and the board of the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement. Dr. Morales holds a BA in Latin American Latino Studies and an MS in International Public Service Management from DePaul University and an EDD in Organizational Leadership at the University of Laverne. So welcome, Dr. Morales. We are also joined by Lauren Bartschi, and she is the Associate Director of the Carnegie Elective Classifications, supporting the operational management of the elective classifications and building new connections through collaboration with national and international partners. Her professional background includes experiential education and international study program management, national fellowship advising, and enrollment management. She received multiple study grants to Germany, Poland, and the Netherlands, including a Fulbright English teaching assistantship in Germany from 2010 to 2011. She holds a BA in German from Hendrix College, an MA in German Studies from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and an MS in experiential education from Minnesota State University, Mankato. Thank you very much for being with us. And I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Morales and Lauren. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Kimberly, and welcome everyone in person and joining us online. Before we get started, I would love for the folks who are joining us online to throw in the chat your name and where you're joining us from, what institution, and maybe where you're located so we can kind of get to know each other. And while we do that, we'll move to some additional introductions, and we're happy to be here to talk about the community engagement elective classification and hopefully, calm some fears and encourage participation. So you heard a little bit about myself and Lauren, but now we're going to introduce our co-presenters, Josh Young and Lori Moog, to introduce themselves. Josh, do you want to start?
Great, welcome. Yes, I'm Josh Young. I'm at Miami-Dade College. We're a huge community college in Miami, Florida, with 8 campuses, about 100,000 students, and I'm the college-wide director for the Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy. And it's great to be here. And we secured the community engagement designation in 2009 and also 2015, and we'll be reapplying in 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Lori?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Moog, Director of Service Learning Community Outreach at Raritan Valley Community College, which is located in beautiful central New Jersey. We have about 8,000 students, and we have a very, very large service learning program relative to our size campus. This will be the 3rd time we are applying for the Carnegie classification. We received the classification first in 2008, then reclassified in 2015. And so we're applying for the 2024 cycle. I'm really thrilled to be here and talking to my colleagues at community colleges across the country. I've worked for the past 27 years with many, many colleges and universities, 2-year, 4-year, publics, privates, and not only because I work at a community college, but I think that community college is fabulous. They do a tremendous amount of work, and I'm here to help you think about applying for the Carnegie and to let you know it's really not as bad as you think it might be.
Thanks. We have our resident experts with us. Lori also sits on the National Advisory Committee for the Community Engagement Elective. So we're really blessed to have her expertise, knowledge, and experience on our National Advisory Committee. So let's move on. So just in terms of an overview, what we want to cover today, we hope to support community colleges in the initial steps of building a classification team and aligning data and resources. So we will cover sort of what is the elective classification for community engagement, what are the benefits going through the process, what does the process actually entail, and how do you get started for the 2026 cycle. And we'll also share information for 2024, but we know probably most of the folks on this call are in preparation for 26, so we'll sort of cover both of them as we move forward in our presentation today. We'll also share resources with you and ways to access us as you move forward. So just a little bit of history around the community engagement elective. As many of you may know, sort of there was a growing movement in the 90s around community engagement in higher education. There was Learn to Serve money, and there was push from national organizations. This is the time that campus compact was created by presidents to really focus on civic and community engagement. And really the tool was service learning. So that's when we saw many service learning programs developing at colleges and universities across the country. The presidents of colleges and universities across the country made this call, and Carnegie's response to this was really the creation of the elective classification as a tool for institutions that were claiming this as an institutional identity that made great efforts and investments in community engagement. And that is when the pilot for the community engagement elective was kicked off in 2005, and the first one ran in 2006. The goal really from the beginning was to have multiple electives. For pretty much the last 17 years, we've only had the community engagement elective. But through some movement and interest, renewed interest as part of the foundation, we started working with other folks to develop additional electives. So there was Australian and Canadian pilot that began in 2019. The Leadership for Public Purpose pilot began in 2020, and now in 2022, we're housed both the universal side of the Carnegie classifications as well as the electives at the American Council on Education. I'm happy to announce that the Leadership for Public Purpose elective classification is live and available for campuses to apply for. Those are due in December of 2023. The Australian pilot just got kicked off. And so, I'm sorry, the Australian elective just got kicked off, and we'll be launching the Canadian one this coming year. So there has been great movement in the last few years around additional electives, and we're looking to bring on sustainability, Indigenous serving institutions. So really thinking about a suite of electives to help support the institutional identity of our institutions across the country. And just in terms of an overview, I had mentioned that ACE is now home to both the universal as well as the elective classifications. Again, this is the first time that this has happened. So we're hoping that this will bring more connection between them. One of the things that might be of interest to community colleges is on the universal side of the house, we are working on developing a social and economic mobility classification that will be universal and apply to all institutions of higher education in the country. So we're excited to see what that brings, what else that tells us about the landscape of higher ed in the United States, and then the continuing evolution of elective classifications to have this suite where, again, institutions can claim their institutional identity. We will be having the 20th anniversary of the community engagement elective in 2025, and so we're looking towards building towards for that anniversary in big ways. So one of the things that happened when we first came on, and we started, well, Lauren started in October of last year, I started in January, was that we started looking at our own data internally. Most of what we would share was that we had 356 campuses that had the Carnegie Community Engagement Elective classifications, but we didn't really look at what that data meant. And so when we started to sort of parse it out, we found, great, we have representation in 49 states and territories across the country, so there's this right depth, but we didn't have, we had this breadth, but we didn't have the depth. We only have 16 community colleges currently that hold the classification. And for us, that was definitely disappointing, but also an area of growth. And so one of the things that we decided was that we wanted to make sure that we were targeting community colleges, doing outreach and capacity building. This is part of why we're here today and our interest in talking and hearing from community colleges around the application to increase that number. Both in terms of what we do, but also how we assess. And I'll talk a little bit about the peer review process that we're going to be moving into. The other piece is that of the 356, only 79 were under the minority serving institution category. And of those, only 5 were HBCUs. Again, another area of growth for us and interest in terms of targeted outreach and capacity building. And as you can see from the sort of number at the bottom, we're probably pretty much evenly divided between public and private institutions. And so excited to sort of think about what that means in terms of the landscape and what we're learning from different institution types. In addition to that, we have a great number that are up for third time classification. So meaning that they've done first time classification, they're up for second reclass. We have 94 privates and 134 publics. And so this shows commitment to this over time, right? A level of institutionalization and thinking, what can we learn from these institutions who are going through this for the third time, and ways that we can also continue to support that. In addition to that, our attainment rate, so the percentage of campuses that were successful in their attainment of the classification, we gauge at 61% from the 2020 cycle. And so while it says, it's difficult, it is still doable. And through the capacity building that we're trying to do, want to increase that percentage as well. And so for us, it's important to pull this data, share this data, and also on our end, have the field hold us accountable towards this data as we move forward with the different changes that we're making to the application.
So we are sitting in the middle of our current application cycle, which is 2024. The cycles are named for when we make the national announcement, not for when they're actually due. So right now we're sitting in the 2024 cycle, which means the application is open and live. If institutions are still interested in applying this cycle, the application purchase deadline is on Monday, October 31st, so this coming Monday. And that will help us determine how many applications are going to be in the process. We recruit an adequate number of reviewers. And we have a peer review process, which we'll get into a little bit later in our kind of presentation today, but that helps us recruit the number of appropriate reviewers for the work. It's not due until May 1st, so we still have plenty of time to work through the application. And then we'll start the review process over the summer. We'll tell campuses internally in December of their status, and then report back nationally with a big public announcement in January of 2024. We know that many of our institutions are actually going to probably apply in 2026. We're on the call today, so giving you all some forecasting what that looks like. The application will open immediately in January of 2024. That's going to be the updated framework, as we call it, or the application. Plus, it'll be available on GivePulse, our kind of platform that hosts their application for purchase. Of a purchase deadline in November of 2024, the same thing to help us understand how many reviewers we need. It'll be due April 1st, 2025, and then announced in January of 2026. So just note that we're kind of in the middle of a cycle, but we know many people are still thinking about this in a long-term range, so that we have both timelines available for you all. So what are some of the benefits of applying for this process? Why would you even get into it? So there's kind of a variety of factors that contribute to the benefits of this work. And first and foremost, we kind of align the community engagement with institutional identity. Many institutions declare that their identity and mission is related to community engagement, public service, and that kind of public purpose mission. So this work kind of, and going through the self-study process, kind of helps align and distinguish how community engagement is enacted on their campuses and in their communities, distinguished from peer institutions. This is a self-study. So it's a way to kind of bring parts of the campus and community together to advance a unified agenda of community engagement and identify best practices on your campus and areas of opportunity to continue that growth and institutional transformation. It's part of that accountability. So how do we know that we're doing well by our community partners, by our constituents, by our students, our faculty and staff? And kind of aligning this self-study helps identify the areas that we really would like to continue to build on and to kind of enhance the areas that we already have great strength. And through that, it becomes a catalyst of change. So how do we continue to align our best practices in teaching and learning and scholarship to advance the future of community engagement on our campuses and with our communities? Many campuses talk about, maybe, speak campuses quite a bit about what have been the benefits of doing this on their own campuses. And we've had a couple of institutions talk about how the community engagement elective classification is one of the highest forms of recognition for this in their field. And this is a way to kind of self-assess, kind of a quality improvement process to achieve, personal and institutional goals for engagement. And it's also able to kind of lift elements of the mission of our campuses and really play out some of the distinctions that were not necessarily represented fully in national conversations or regular public data that's available, such as the basic classification on iPads that really let us know where our strengths lie. What I'm going to do now is we're going to turn it over to our also lovely guests, or kind of panelists, Josh and Lori, to talk about how it's beneficial for their campuses. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. You know, in the previous slide, someone said this is one of the highest forms of recognition possible in the field. To me, this is the gold standard, right? This is not just one of the highest ones. This is what we should all be shooting for. And the other thing is, someone in your quote said, this is a fine way to achieve that goal. Again, this is, in my opinion, the best way to achieve it. It's the gold standard. The whole process, the questions that it asks are a ready-made self-study, a self-assessment. It can help you figure out where you're at, what you need to work on. It's a roadmap. So if you're an institution that is generally committed to this and really want to take this seriously and be intentional about it, like, this is the way to get there. And it's a tool just to start building your plan for 2026. If let's say that it takes a while, right, to get to the point where you can become a community engaged institution, but you have to start, and this is the roadmap. And maybe, I know a lot of institutions apply more than once, it takes a while to get there, but just going through that process will move you along the pathway of getting there. And one thing I've noticed also, every cycle the process has gotten more thoughtful, the types of questions they ask. There's so much research out there now about what does it really mean to be a truly engaged institution. And the questions are built to assess that and to help us make sure we have everything in place to really meet the standards. So again, it's a must do. And I know at MDC, I mean, we're super proud of it. We're definitely going to apply again in 2026. And the process of being part of this webinar had forced me to look at the questions again. And I'm so excited to go through the process. I think there's about 35 to 40 questions. And I'm really looking for, because, you know, we've been doing this work for a while, but we're still a work in progress. And so even for an institution like Miami College, where we've achieved a lot, we have so much more to learn and so much more to build on. So for every one of the 35 to 40 questions, Marisol and Lauren, I'm not sure exactly how many questions are on there. I was calculating about 40, but for every one of those questions, I'm thinking about, what are we currently doing? What could we do differently? What can we learn from others? And I'm really excited about us applying again in 2026, because it's going to take our program to the next level of quality and impact, which is what we all want. So thank you so much. I'll turn it over to Lori.
Thanks, Josh. Could we just move into my slide before I speak?
Yes. We'll have
Sorry, Lori, it's stuck. Hold on.
It's okay. I can wait.
there we go.
There it goes.
All righty. So I want to say I echo everything that Lauren and Josh have said about the benefits and the priorities that they just, very eloquently explained. I guess the one thing that I'm thinking of how I can add to this is I think it's really important that we legitimize the work that we're doing. And it's getting better. As I mentioned to you earlier, I've been doing this for 27 years. 27 years ago, no one knew what service learning was. No one knew what community engagement really was. And we've come such a long way. But I think it's really important that we don't operate at the fringes of our institution, and that we, make the work that we do much more mainstream and connected to every process that goes on at the institution. And I do think that the classification allows you that opportunity to make those connections. Like when, I started doing the third time classification for the 2024 cycle, I started looking at the questions, started reaching out to my colleagues, and quite frankly, am really extremely impressed with the work that they're doing and being able to collect that information and that data and make it part of what it is we do as an engaged campus and how we're making this more sustainable. And I think it's important because this work is not going to go away. It's only going to get better. And you do need a roadmap. There are things that I filled out that I didn't even know we were doing, but it gave me a chance to really take a deep dive into what work we're doing and to write about it. And it's never lost. That is one of the things I could say to you. I use it for grant writing. I use it to apply for awards. I share the information that has been written with other departments, and they use it as part of their fundraising, their operations. And really, when you think about it, if I didn't have this blueprint of what is going on our campus, I don't know if we really would know. And I think it's really important that, we continue to assess the work that we're doing. And I think the Carnegie really does a great job. I don't know any other framework out there that really allows you to collect everything that you've been doing related to engagement. I don't know if I have another slide connected to this, if there's another one. Okay. And, I'm just looking at, I don't want to read these to you, but I do want to say that I think it's really important. Again, I'm going to drive home the point of having this evidence that, it's one thing to say that you're good at what you do. It's another thing to have an outside institution like the Carnegie classifying you and saying that your work has been benchmarked against other institutions, 2-year, 4-year, publics, privates, and it's equally as good. So, again, those are the additional benefits that I believe the Carnegie can bring to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori.
Lauren, can I just say one thing? I was talking about how it's an example of a roadmap. So there are some questions on there around faculty recruitment and hiring, faculty tenure and promotion, examples of policies that reward faculty for community engagement. And obviously, when you apply for Carnegie, you're not going to be perfect on everything. But that's an example of something that I have to revisit because I know there's more MDC could do. I don't think we have much in writing. So, but that's a beautiful challenge, right? Like I need to find the right people, our vice provost for academic affairs, our faculty union person, and work with them. And so again, when I talk about a roadmap, because we do want to get to the point where community engagement is taken into consideration in recruitment and hiring. We do want to have written policies that promote and encourage community engagement around faculty promotion. And we want to have examples of policies that reward faculty for doing this work. So what a beautiful opportunity to help us become an even more engaged institution. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, Josh. I think, okay. One of the things actually, we were just at UCLA yesterday and having the conversation about this during a training. And, I think one of the things that came up in that is how do you use this as a tool internally to help move forward the conversations about spaces of development? And so, thinking about this as that tool to ask those questions internally, find the answers, and then build something out from that, I think is exactly what you're talking about, Josh, in terms of the roadmap. And so we're really excited for folks to use this as a way to start those conversations on campus. We don't expect campuses to achieve 100% on everything, right? It's reviewed holistically, but if it gets conversations moving on campus, review of policies and procedures, right? That is what the benefit is, I think, for the folks on the ground who are doing this work. So, hey, here's the definition. So one of the things that it's important to know is that the definition is core to this application process. It is how we train reviewers to assess the application and what we ask colleges and universities to look at as they're developing their answers for the application. So as you can see from this definition, and I won't read it to you, but there's two parts to it. One is the process of engagement and then the purpose of engagement. I guess for those joining us both online and in person, what are some things that stand out for you from this definition? A few minutes to read it.
So I just want to jump in and say that one of the things I really love about this definition, and I'm so glad that Carnegie has put this out, is because there are so many different definitions of engagement, right? We refer to it as experiential learning, high impact practices, civic engagement, and, being able to look at this, I would say it's extremely comprehensive, and it takes in, I think, all of the elements that we do on our campuses. And so I really do appreciate having this definition that I ascribe to as well.
Hi, Lori, it's Patty. I agree. And I think it's really interesting looking at this definition, because when we started our program here at COC, we used Thomas Ehrlich's definition, which is certainly extremely great. But this, I think, is a definition that's a bit more concise. And it also puts a great emphasis on partnerships and reciprocity, which I think are extremely important. And that idea of how you're bringing in the community into the campus, so the campus community kind of interplay and the way to intersect the two are extremely important. And I think that's described much more in this definition than I would say with Ehrlich's, even though Ehrlich's is a great definition, but I really like this.
Thanks. Are there any contributions from the?
Yeah, some folks in the chat mentioned reciprocity as kind of this key word that stands out to folks, so that distinguishes the work from some others, just being in the community, but being with community and this kind of co-creation.
Yeah. So let's go to the second part.
I would just like to add one more thing. I work with a lot of colleges who are building their service learning and engagement programs. And one of the very, very first things I tell them and ask them is, do you have a definition campus-wide of your work? And I think it's really important, as again, because we have so many different offices that really do this kind of work, but it's important that there is one kind of definition that everyone could look towards to describe this engagement work. So, and again, this is, a great starting point to, Patty's point as well.
No, absolutely. That's, I think, a great point. And I think that that's what makes the classification so important, is that there's a common language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the second part is about the purpose of engagement. So the first was how we do it, right? And then the second part is why we do it. And, again, what stands out to you about this second piece of the definition? Lori, Josh, do you want to share anything before we move to the folks in person?
Yeah, I'll just say that, again, it's great because it's all encompassing. It's really about everything that we do. It's, we don't do just one thing on campus, right? It's scholarship, it's the curriculum, it's research, it's, promoting the public good. And, it really kind of justifies and gives purpose to the work that we're doing. And so it's a great definition. And it's, again, covers almost everything that we try to do on campuses.
Yeah. Josh?
I would just add, and I put this in the chat, the very first question, if I'm not mistaken, of the application is, does your campus have an institutionally sanctioned definition of community engagement, a clear and shared definition, core standards and values? So everything emanates off of that starting point. So this is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, I would say, looking at this definition, I think this is great. I think having this separated between process and purpose is so extremely important. And so when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking of the kinds of things that we've done on our campus, that purpose has played a major, major role. And I think, again, for those folks who might be considering doing this, but you're kind of a little bit frightened by it, I think start to sort of deconstruct this definition and start to look at each of the parts, and you'll be surprised what you've been doing on campus already.
Great. Some folks in the chat had mentioned this idea of civic responsibility. The definition as being something that really stood out to them as being really important.
One of our focuses is really integrating the world of civic responsibility with workforce preparedness, because that really is a part of civic responsibility, right? And that's one of the things that we're hearing from our employers, is that they need us to have a holistic approach as we're preparing our students, not only in the discipline, but how to be a citizen at work. And so one of the ways that we're in particular working with faculty as we're building community engagement is looking at industry, both profit and nonprofit, as co-educators with our faculty, because they bring the perspective of workforce into the classroom. And I think that that is what, if we, given that so many of us are in a guided pathways environment, that really helps the student to understand the pathway that they're on and to clarify their purpose and commitment and their role in this.
Thank you. What's your name?
Harriet Happ.
Harriet Happel. Thank you, Harriet. One of the things I used to say at my former institution was our work needs to make students sort of career and community ready. And so that holistic piece that you spoke about, I think is really key. And the definition tries to do that because it includes public, private, nonprofit in this as well. Institutions can have their own definition, that's fine. It's just the explanation. Institutions can decide to use the Carnegie one, that's fine too. But we want you to sort of think about the definition as sort of the seed by which all is then kind of bloomed from.
I just want to add to what I think it's Harriet that you mentioned, really good point about bringing up workforce. So, really workforce has been doing this for years, right? They called it apprenticeships. And it was basically that idea that you would go out, you'd have a mentor, you'd work, you'd contribute. Workforce, again, to my knowledge, is really something that community colleges do very well. I don't really see workforce at four-year schools. And again, this is something very, very unique. So if any of you have workforce programs, dig really deep into what they're doing and connect with them, because I think there's going to be a lot of information, and they're important. They are an important part of the engagement piece. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, Lori, that makes me think about how if they don't have, if the workforce programs don't have that sort of civic piece, like it can, the conversations can happen to develop that and integrate that. And because of what you're saying here, in terms of employers looking for that in students, both sides.
Well, it's a two-way street. And this is how I think the community colleges really can partner with the universities, because technically the universities should be preparing for workforce. This is what we're finding, is that we're getting more and more students with a BA coming back to the community college to get a career education certification or degree to get employment, because they can't get employment with their bachelor's. So when we're looking at the overall goals of social and economic mobility, this is our opportunity now to partner better so that we're looking at both engaged citizens and how are we preparing them for workforce.
I know we have some university community partnerships thinking about applying at the same time, and how they're sharing some of the programs that they're doing together in each of their applications. And so it'll be interesting to see where that partnership piece comes in, especially if they both move towards the application together and they're sharing that engagement experience. Having a little problems with our clickers. So we will move to manual clicking. All right.
So the classification is meant to be a benchmarking tool. One of the reasons why the classifications were founded is kind of to think differently than the base classification, which meant to classify institutions and divide them in many ways into kind of peer institution groups, but it came this kind of hierarchy system. In the elective classifications, everyone plays in the exact same sandbox. All institutions are together to kind of celebrate the unique way they do community engagement together. So the benchmarking tool, the classification itself is descriptive. It's qualitative. There's one question that asks for numbers. It's really qualitative description, the stories of what the work is compared to just root numbers and statistical analysis, right? It's self-reporting, so you collect the stories across your campuses, you collect the work and outline it in the application as part of your self-study. And it's meant to think about how your work is in alignment with best practices in the field. It's a tool that's meant to not create hierarchy, but really think about celebrating the unique practices and approaches to community engagement, so everyone's in the exact same space. Community colleges, liberal arts colleges, public universities, private universities, they're all together in the exact same space, as well as graduate and technical programs, they're all kind of in the same environment.
And I just add, in a landscape of competition that we know higher ed is, this is a space of collaboration and learning from that makes us really proud to do this work. Next slide. So, when we think about the application and what you're including in terms of the narratives and the stories, we want you to think about the difference between community engaged and community based, right? So community engaged looks at that sharing of decision-making power between the community and the institution. It looks at campus and co-defining problems and co-creating goals and outcomes, right? And it has an asset-based, it looks at the strengths, skills, and knowledges of those in the community and how they're legitimized and validated within this partnership, really. So that reciprocity and partnership piece is key, and that's why you'll see it at the first part of the application. Versus community-based, where things are just happening in the community, but it's not co-created with the community. So if you think about just community-based, the decision-making power still is in the hands of the campus. The campus is the one who's defining the goals, the problems, the outcomes, and the campus knowledge is prioritized. We know oftentimes the partnerships sort of go between these two things, but really the stories that we want you to share are ones where that thoughtful process of co-creation has been embedded. And those are really where we think the best practices happen, because that's the richest space of partnership and collaboration. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the application is broken up, the different sections. One of the things to note is in this application cycle and the ones coming up, we have changed the fee structure. What we have done is created an equity-based model for the fee. So it's based on full-time student enrollment and then expenditures per student to calculate the fee. So institution has to put in its IPEDS number. The system calculates the fee based on that. You can see the fee on our fee chart on our website. But it also pulls institutional data directly from IPEDS, so you don't have to put that in. And that's the first kind of part of it. And then we move to the context. And that's a really important piece of the application, because what you're doing is telling the reviewer about your institution, the students you serve, the community you're located in, the partners you have, right? It's giving them the basis of knowledge to be able to then read and assess everything else that you're putting in the application. And so really thinking about that kind of section number 2 as telling the most in-depth story about your campus that helps the person who's unfamiliar to understand who you are, what your institutional values are, and how that connects to the engagement that you're doing in partnership with community. It helps us understand who your students are, who you're trying to serve, what are maybe some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that you have through this engagement that's happening with the community. We then look at aspects of quality of community engagement relationships. This is where the partnership piece comes in. Right? How do you understand this quality? How do you define quality? Are community partners engaged in helping you think about that relationship and assess the quality? What do those academic community partners, campus community partnerships look like, right? This is where you will identify a set number of community partners that you have. These folks will also be included as part of this application round. We send community surveys to the community partners that you list for them to provide us with an assessment of the partnership. Those surveys don't go out to the community partners until after the institution has submitted the application, but this also gives you an entryway to talk to your community partners about the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification. You can share this survey with them beforehand. It's available as a PDF on our website, and it allows you to kind of put forth the strongest partnerships you have. And that's the first section of it. We then move to institutional identity and culture, thinking about the infrastructure and finance. So how is this supported? Where is the money? Where are the resources to support this work on campus? The other piece I would say about this, that you really want to think about a cross-institutional team, and the questions about infrastructure and finance really help to bring sort of disparate parts of the institution together to think about this more holistically. So it's not just located in one area of the institution, but really how are we doing this across the institution? We look at then institutional or campus-wide tracking and monitoring and assessment. Are courses tagged? How do you know what's happening on campus? How are they assessed? What are learning outcomes? We move to outcomes and impacts. We think about faculty and student and staff. So how is this connected to promotion, right? What policies exist? What's the demographic of the folks who are doing this work, right? We know that research shows that more female and faculty of color are the ones doing this work. Are they being, is it safe for them to do this work on campus? Is it an extra burden, or are they being supported in doing this? We look at curricular and co-curricular engagement and separating some of those out. One of the things I would say is that we review this holistically, but it has to be connected to the core academic work of the institution, right? So we need to be able to see it in courses and how it looks across the institution and department. So the curricular piece that I would say is definitely an important aspect of this application. And then where is it happening in the co-curricular space of the institution? How are those speaking to each other? Are there ways to think about, even in section 12 with the pathways for student development and learning through community engagement, what kind of leadership opportunities are available for students? Is there a scaffolded way for them to take both curricular and co-curricular engagement? And then the community engagement and other initiatives, this is a space for you to tell us other things that we may not have asked or you didn't have a chance to sort of talk about in the rest of the application. These might be where you include partnerships with four-year institutions around engagement, right? Or things that you're particularly proud of that maybe didn't fit into the other buckets. And then finally, the reflection and other initiatives, really thinking about what this process looked like for your institution. What did you learn? What are spaces that you want to delve into from what you learned? What are things that we should know about the process? What can help us make this application better? What would you need as a community college from us to support? Overall, we try to have this be both rigorous but a useful tool for your own development, right? And thinking about the ways that you use already existing things like strategic planning or civic action planning, any other kind of outside assessment and data that you have to support your application process. Anything you'd add, Lauren?
Yeah, the reflection piece is a really key element. You know your institution's best, and the core part of the reflection is thinking about the process move along. So I encourage you not just to work on the reflection at the end, but continually taking time throughout the process to slowly incrementally reflect on who's in the room, what are you learning and why that matters, and how are you then working to improve opportunities for students, faculty, staff, and community to work together as you move through. And then there's kind of a nice way to tie that all together in the application. And I think it helps I think it helps our institutions more than it actually helps us think about how the process works in your campuses.
Yeah, and just kind of nuts and bolts, most sections have 500 words, some sections are 1,000. You can have collaborators on the application. So, there could be several folks who are working at the same time. It's kind of organized the way Google Docs are, so you can see who last contributed. It'll save in real time. What other kind of nuts and bolts pieces about this? There are about 60 questions. Ish.
Yeah, but the class applications before this cycle, questions are kind of spread all over the place. And we really try to organize it thematically. So if you do work in a team, you do work in chunks, you're kind of focusing on kind of a core area at the same time. You might tackle it together and say, all right, let's really think about our assessment processes and look at the questions that are just about assessment and thinking about those at the same time. Whereas beforehand, you kind of moved up the application in maybe a less organized fashion. So we hope that this helps with that process too.
Yeah, and you don't have to answer the application in a linear process, right? You can move from section to section, thinking about where you want to start off with and what makes sense.
Marcel and Lauren, this is Josh. So I was mentioning earlier how I like the way it's set up, because under each of these headings that you have there's questions. So for example, under co-curricular engagement, one of the questions is describe how community engagement is integrated into co-curricular practices. Give 2 to 4 examples and they have a list of 14, and they say, pick a couple of these and give us examples. So community service projects, student leadership, internships, work study, athletics, and others. So if you're a school that maybe is not quite there yet, but you want to become a community engagement, it gives you opportunity to think about what can we do with work study? What can we do with athletics intentionally around community engagement? What can we do around internships? Do we have internships, public sector internships? What can we do? How can we be more intentional with student leadership? Do we make sure every student goes through some type of in-depth change-making, community engagement training so they really understand it more deeply? So all those things are not that hard to do and to build out, right? But that's where, again, there's a roadmap if you go question by question and think about all of these aspects. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, because, that roadmap piece means there's some indication of like, oh, this is an area that we can think about, like we haven't thought about, but maybe let's think about, or, let's see what others are doing around this that might be beneficial for our campus. I think, in addition to that, this application is really meant to be a collaborative effort, not only internally within your own institution, but thinking about the ways that you can connect with other institutions, either in your local area or across the country. That's why we're really excited to see the participation from across the country in today's training, and thinking about how you all can also sort of create your own communities of practice and support each other and learn from one another. So you're not replicating the wheel, but you're seeing what might work. I will say for the 2026 application, I can give you a heads up around this now for folks who are thinking about this. We will be adding a section around civic and democratic engagement separate from other sections. Right now it's kind of woven in, but we know a lot of campuses are doing work around voter registration, voter outreach. And so those kinds of things will be located in a separate section of the application, so we can really highlight that. It's definitely mentioned in our definition of community engagement, but it's not separated out. And so we want to also bring that to the forefront, the importance of that democratic and civic engagement. I think that's a really important space that community colleges have been in for a long time, and ways to highlight the stories coming from community colleges in terms of democratic participation.
So I would just like to add something. All of these sections are really valuable and really great to report on. But I just want to highlight one in particular that is relevant, very much so, for community colleges, which is number 5, institutional identity and culture. And I say that because I was a reviewer through 2 cycles of Carnegie. And it's really important for community colleges to describe what it is they're working with. You know, they are not Stanford University. They do not have those resources, but that doesn't mean that the work that they're doing isn't great. And you really have to actually mention what it is you're working with. Like, for instance, I did review an application for a community college that was in a rural area, and they were working with many, many disadvantaged populations. They had extreme challenges, but despite those challenges, they created a really nice profile of what they were trying to do to be an engaged campus. And without that understanding of what they were up against and who they were, it would really be difficult for a reviewer to assess their answers and see what, okay, they're not in the same space and they don't have the same resources as a large institution, but, they're small and mighty and look what they're doing. And that has to be considered when people are reviewing the application. So I just wanted to point that particular one out.
Thanks, Laura.
So let's dive a bit in to see, now that we have an overview of what the application might look like, how to start working on it and some tips. Oh, data first. All right, so what data can we use? So the applications, it's not just a free-for-all, use all the data you can find, but certain data or application years or academic years fall into certain application cycles. So for the current 2024 cycle, if you're working on it right now, because of COVID, we're allowing a wide range of data to be included in the application. So we're including the pre-COVID year, academic year 2018-19, and 2019-20, 2021, and 21-22. This means you can mix and match data across the application from these 4 years. And we just ask that you include the academic year in each of your responses so we know what year it's from. The only question that you have to just pick 1 year for is there's a chart about curricular engagement that talks about number of classes, number of faculty. That needs to come from 1 year. But even in your responses, you can pick and solicit examples from multiple years. This gives you a wide variety of opportunities to talk about, how you might have pivoted the work during COVID and really reinvigorated your engagement process and interesting opportunities. But recognize too that some campuses or all campuses were impacted by COVID in really unique ways. And so only using COVID data might not be beneficial for your campus. So giving you the chance to kind of mix and match what works the best for you.
And I would add for the folks applying for 2024 in that chart piece, you should, try to get the data from each of the years and look at them, right, and do a comparison to choose which year you want to use to submit. So it'll give you an opportunity to also do that analysis, because as you're sort of doing that description, you're going to explain why you chose that particular year.
Yes, thank you, Marisol. That's great. And then in 2026, the application is for this current academic year of 2022-23 and 23-24. It's the next academic year. If you've had a chance to really sit and assess and reflect on that data before you use it, and I say and or for all of these, right? You can choose to mix and match, or you can choose 1 year. It really makes sense, whatever makes sense for you. We don't want you to feel like you have to use all 4 years or both 2 years. It's all available for you to be using.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we're getting into strategies. Got ahead of myself. So what does this look like, and how do you maybe approach the application? So first, we really encourage you to look into the unique characteristics of community colleges. I think some examples that were shared already is that you're in a real, unique of a way of being able to prepare students to be workforce or career and community ready. And there's some infrastructure in place that makes that really interesting. As we know, students live and work in the community served by the college. That's not always the case for some four-year institutions where students are coming from much farther away. Your students are here and they're local and they are the community as well. There's a diverse population of students. They're high school graduates, older adults, underserved minorities, first generation immigrants, lifelong learners. There's no such thing as non-traditional and traditional learners anymore. And that's really, I think, in community colleges see that the most, I think, of our institutions. There are job training and workforce programs that have really interesting approaches to community engagement. that should be reflected in the application that are unique to the space. It's a public institution. You're an important resource, and the communities rely on you all for education, human and financial support. And so, what was that actually happening? And there's often public and private partnerships within community engagement programs. So, what does that look like? And also, as we mentioned earlier, kind of 2-year, 4-year partnerships too that might be really interesting in this space. So really do a landscape analysis of what this might look like, and kind of think creatively as you work through the application. Lori and Josh, is there anything you want to add here about this, unique characters of community colleges?
So I'll just jump in and say, one of the very unique aspects is that community colleges do serve a very, very diverse population, and there's lots of opportunities in the classification to describe that. I'm thinking of one section in particular where you talk about examples of your curricular and co-curricular programs or students who have been involved, and to report on the fact that these are potentially immigrants or adults returning to college or minorities, and what they have achieved and what they've accomplished, I think is pretty significant to report on. So again, I'm just going to harken back to what I keep saying, is that community colleges really have a wealth of information that is at their hands to describe the great work that they're doing and how they're engaging their community. And I know that community colleges doing lots of different stuff around, reaching out to diverse populations. So that's a section that will certainly help us as we, apply for the application.
So Lauren, in one of the earlier slides, you shared that only 16 community colleges are currently classified. And that's so unfortunate and so worrisome when you think of, I think there's about 1,000 community colleges in the United States, and about 40% of undergraduates attend community colleges. And our students face a huge civic empowerment gap.
Right.
That's a fact. But only 16 have this designation. So I think it's so important what you're doing here and trying to help community colleges encourage more of us to undergo this process, because what are the implications for our democracy when 40% of students attend community colleges and they're not getting the opportunities or high quality opportunities to become more civically engaged? And that worries me. And that's why we all have to do everything we can to get more community colleges involved in this process and help them.
Thanks, Josh. We also want to make sure that the application fee is not a barrier for participation for community colleges. So we offer fee waivers. Just email us and we're happy to provide a fee waiver for the application, particularly for community colleges and the other targeted institutions that we're looking to increase participation from.
So one of the questions, section 13, we kind of mentioned is this other initiative space. And we think this is a really key area for some community colleges to shine. It says check all that apply here, but realistically it's you check all that apply and then you pick one or two to give examples from. But there's some really interesting spaces, including lifelong learning, outreach activities, food security programs, social entrepreneurship. There's really interesting ways that here community colleges particularly shine. So really take advantage of this space to really talk about what your campuses are doing.
I agree with you, Lauren. I loved this section. This was one of the easiest because this really speaks to all the work that community colleges are doing. And it would be almost impossible for community colleges not to report on some of these areas. So yes, you're right. These are areas where community colleges do shine.
I'll give you your spotlight, Lori. So Lori, you shared this lovely visual about the work and how you think about this at Raritan Valley. So will you share a little bit about this campus scan that you've done?
Sure, thank you. So one of the things that the reason I created this slide, I mean, we do a lot of different engagement activities on our campus, but since I run the service learning program, I wanted to just demonstrate how what the work that we do through service learning and community engagement really touches on every aspect of the institution. So of course, we work, with the various faculty and courses. We have about 85 courses that offer service learning, maybe 85, 90. And, they are within all academic departments and various courses within those departments. But that's not the only area that enriches the work that we do. So, we have a separate office for internships, co-ops, the career services office, and we work very closely with them. So much so that I've now created a co-curricular pathway for service learning, meaning that there are students who might not have the opportunity to be offered service learning in a particular course, but they still want to volunteer. And so we provide them the same opportunities in terms of who our community partners are in the placements and our student engagement transcript that we give to students. And I've really been pleased to see how much that co-curricular pathway has grown. And then subsequently, those co-curricular students do become aware of service learning. And the following semester, many of them do service learning in their courses because either their course is offering it or they approach their faculty member and ask them if they could do service learning. And that really helps with kind of growing the program and the number of faculty. The foundation has been such a strong supporter. Currently, they are, service learning and community engagement is one of their elements for their Futures campaign that they are running. And they've already, raised awareness so much so that we have a particular donor that has, is supporting service learning in a number of different ways. And, it's like we've been actually able to expand the work that we're doing in that area. As an example, we have students who are involved in being poll workers for the election, and we were able to give them extra money in addition to the money that they receive from the state to be a poll worker. We were able to create a new position called a student ambassador position and have them involved in Engage New Jersey, which my colleague Saul Peterson is on the call, a consortium of colleges and universities in the state. And it's been great to be able to send a student to be a representative on one of Engage New Jersey's committees and have the student voice as well. And then again, I just want to, Phi Theta Kappa is perfect honors program. So the honors program has just as of fall 2023, and this was because I've worked several years with the faculty council for the honors program, and they finally agreed that service learning is a requirement starting the fall for all students in order to graduate from the honors program. So again, this piece just shows you how many different areas, how many tentacles you could reach out to, the various ways in which you work on your campus. Another way is to actually use placements. The planetarium, the theater has always offered opportunities for our students to volunteer who don't have transportation. And, it just really shows how we're working not only with the local community, but we're regional, international, and national through the work that we do. So not everybody will have a service learning office or community engagement office, but there has to be some sort of centerpiece somewhere on your institution. It might be workforce, it might be career services, it might be student life that you could dig deep into to see the connectedness of this work.
Thanks, Laurie. Let's move on to the next slide. So when we think about sort of the pathways to community engagement and the building of the team, you want to think about a few different ways. The mission pathway, so making sure that you're pulling from your institutional mission, right? And connecting it to that as you're telling your story. The partnership pathway has to deal with the community partners you have, how you're explaining that. Where the production of new knowledge is. And this may be in sort of different forms within community colleges. And it may be in the spaces of also, cross-sector partnerships that are coming together, or partnerships between 2 and 4 year institutions. And then within the context of teaching and learning, the courses that you're supporting. And so thinking about the ways you're able to tell this holistic story of your institution is going to be a really important key part of the application. Josh, you want to share your application process?
Yes. So this will be the 3rd time that we've gone through it. And so I'm thinking about this now in preparation for 2026. But for me, and my recommendation is you start with the application, you start with the questions. And that will help you identify what a good process could or should be. So for example, I'm looking here at some of the questions. It asks about how is community engagement defined and placed in your strategic plan? So who's the person, who's the gatekeeper for the strategic plan? Who's the expert in that area? Who's involved in developing the next strategic plan? They need to be part of this application process. Describe your business practices, hiring, purchasing, procurement. How do they align with economic and community development? So who is that person? I'm not sure what the title would be, but there's someone at every institution dealing with that. They even have a question about how do you assure that the community benefits when your institution is involved in local property acquisition and real estate development. So, who's the point person for that? How about assessment? How do you assess the community's perceptions of the institution's engagement with the community? All of our institutions periodically do some surveys of the community. So is there a question in there about related to that, or could they add one? How about provide examples of institutional, departmental, and or programmatic learning outcomes related to civic engagement? Do you have an honors college? Do you have different cohorts? Like at MDC, we have the Rising Black Scholars, we have the Presidential Scholars. Are they intentional around civic engagement? And if they're not, how hard would it be to help them build something in? So people like that should be part of this team. How about professional development support? That's another part of the application. So your director of the teaching and learning center, or whatever you call it. I mentioned earlier faculty recruitment and hiring, like who, and faculty tenure and promotion. Who are the gatekeepers? Who are the key stakeholders for that area? They need to be involved. How about transcripts? We have a co-curricular transcript, which works pretty well, but we haven't actually got it on the official academic transcript. Maybe you want to involve your registrar to see if that's possible. Who's in charge of the work study or internships? How about athletics? These are all people that should be part of your team. And my plan for 2026 is first I will become very familiar with application. Then I'm going to meet with our president and executive leadership to go through the application, quickly talk about each question, find out from them who they think should be in the room, who should be part of this college-wide stakeholder meeting. Also, I know the reality of most community colleges, and often community engagement kind of falls under student affairs, student life, but they just don't have time to dedicate to this. That's the problem. There's not one person that can really take this on. At MDC, obviously, we're not in that situation because we have staffing, we have centers, we have infrastructure, but most community colleges don't. And it's hard to get new full-time and even part-time positions. So how about finding some money where you could hire a consultant? And that could work for a lot of community colleges that are just getting started. Someone's going to put in the time and effort and move things along. because we all know we have way too much to do. And I'm also going to convene a campus-wide stakeholder meeting with a lot of the people that I had just mentioned a minute ago. But then we're going to have a smaller working group. And then we're going to go by question, and we're going to explore that question. How are we doing? I mentioned earlier, one of the first questions is, does your campus have an institutionally sanctioned definition of community engagement? At MDC, we do, but for a typical community college, if you assess yourself and what's your plan to put that into place, who's going to be responsible, what's the timeline? So you just address, even for MDC, there's a lot of questions here where we have more work to do and we can go deeper and do better. And it's an opportunity to kind of have a strategic plan. And then also, I think for a lot of community colleges, it's unfortunate to have to rely on external funding, but maybe there are funders who really believe deeply in this and in all the equity issues and the mission of community colleges. So maybe you could find some funding that would underwrite some of this for 3 or 5 years or something like that. Because at MDC, the way we got started, we had Corporation for National Community Service grants years ago. But then we had so much success, it gradually got built into the infrastructure of the college, and we're now all funded through the college. So that's my plan for 2026, and I'm really excited. Thanks.
I think, one of the things you mentioned, considering hiring a consultant, one of the things we tried to do as a service to the field was we did a call for consultants, and we selected about 23 folks that we trained on the application. And on our website, you can find a list of those consultants. The arrangements between the institution and the consultant are yours to make. We're not involved in that, but we wanted to sort of have a place for campuses who are considering hiring a consultant to go to identify folks who we knew were trained, that we provided the training and the support for. So if that's a resource that you're looking to consider, definitely go to our website. You'll see a list of consultants with a variety of different backgrounds. There are folks on there with community college backgrounds as well, and those folks have been trained, and those folks are located across the country as well. We're really intentional on making it a diverse set of consultants from across the country and representing different types of institutions. Lori, you want to share your application process?
Sure. So, there really are a lot of different ways that campuses approach this. And, Josh gave a great example of what they're doing at Miami-Dade, which is a very large community college compared to Raritan Valley Community College, which is 8,000 students, one campus. I like to, and I think part of it is because it really works well for my institution. And when you're thinking about this process, you really do have to understand the culture and the environment that you work in and what works for you. So it's not a one size fits all. And so for me, I do a lot of this remotely. I engage everyone because I don't have the kind of information that on my own. I have to reach out to the people who are the heads of various offices and ask them questions. But I do I do most of this remotely. And one of the things that I do is I'll send them the question. I ask them to answer it. Like I've even reached out to our CFO, and he did a fabulous job on answering some of very key questions that pertain to financial aspects that were asked of the application that I could never answer. I've reached out to the foundation and gotten information about their scholarships, but I also visit people's websites, and I gather a lot of information because now people have great websites and they post information there. And one of the other things that I have found extremely helpful when doing this remotely. So my team really is everyone that I'm working with, every office that I report on, but it doesn't mean that I convene a group of people and I sit down and I meet with them, because I try to be as expeditious as possible, because I personally do not have the time either. I'm a really solo practitioner running a very, very big program. So, I have to be considerate of the time that I also have. So this works for me. One of the things that I've done is and we were very lucky to have just completed our accreditation process with the Middle States. And that is chock full of information. So I really, studied that document so carefully to try and extract information from it that would pertain to the Carnegie. I've looked at our strategic plan. I look at our press releases. We have all of our press releases online through our marketing department. Gives me such a great understanding of the different areas in which there are different departments doing wonderful work that I would not know about had I not visited the campus websites where they post all the press releases that go out about things that go on. The Middle States was just so informative, understanding the strategic plan and the process. I was able to use that to answer so many different questions. So I share this with you in the hopes that you don't feel overwhelmed by all of this and feel that you really have to get people together. I know it's very, very difficult, even though people are well-intentioned and they want to do this. It's very difficult for all of you to be available at the same time. But that doesn't mean that these people cannot contribute to the application. And they actually are very interested in providing information, because who doesn't like to talk about the work they're doing? And many of them have been so honored that I even asked them to contribute to this application, and they want to. So that's something that you really might want to consider that might work for your campus as well. And I wanted to bring that up. And as we're starting to learn how to work more and more remotely, this is like a great opportunity too, to try and manage this in a more of a remote way of doing things.
Great, thank you, Lori. One of the things I wanted to mention, especially for both you and Josh, since you're going up for reclass, one of the recommendations we're making to campuses is to create a website around your Carnegie process as a way to document that. And this is also for first-time applicants too. I think it's a good idea because you can share that with the campus. You can direct folks to it, but it also provides a resource for those who are reclassifying, because in the reclassification application, you actually can submit web links. And so it gives another context for reviewers to go to and look towards. But it also creates that institutional memory, because we know that teams have changed over time, right? But it becomes a space to, upload and share your previous applications, talk about who was part of it, give thanks, talk about your community partners, and really document that history publicly as well.
That's great. Thank you. And one other thing that I'd like to add to this, as you jogged my memory, once I've completed a section, I ask other people to review it. And that's been extremely helpful because, having multiple perspectives is really great. Even though I might have spent so much time on a particular section and thought it was great, when I gave it to other people, they would add to this, ask me questions about it, and it really enhanced the answers. So that is another way in which you can share this, and then people can do it on their own time frame. So even if you might want to answer the question yourself, please consider sharing it with other key people at your institution and ask them to review what has been written.
Thanks. I do want to respond to something that was in the chat. If the attribution to the definition of community engagement that we gave actually comes from the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. So it's the foundation's definition that is the core to this application and the review process for it. So it's the Carnegie definition.
Marcel, this has already been mentioned, but I just want to reemphasize that I think you should think about this as a long-term process, and don't think of it as I'm applying and I have to get it in 2026. Of course, that's what you want. But again, if you're committed to this and you're serious about it, it's okay if you don't get it in 2026. Imagine if you make some progress on some of these questions. Imagine if you get some staffing. Imagine if you set up some new programs like a community service work study program, or if you make progress on some of the questions, you're heading in the right direction. And I don't remember, Marcel, after when will be the next time? Of course, apply in 2026, because that's going to force you to work on these things and get movement. Will it be every 2 years? Is that what you said, Marcel?
Yes, every 2 years. So the
Yeah,
next year will be 2028. But just know that by that time, we're going to do significant revisions for the application, especially because we'll have multiple electives in place. So it's going to look very different by 2028.
I mean, Lori was talking about being overwhelming, because it could be overwhelming, but then again, if you think of it as a process, it's less so.
Yeah.
And just one more thing to add to what you're saying, Josh. Think of in terms of telling a story, just it's writing a beautiful story about all the wonderful work that you are doing and your campus is doing. And that I would also encourage you to have one person doing the writing, because you don't want to have different voices when you turn in the application, which would be very difficult for and distracting for a reader. Like, you want the ideas to flow, and have just one particular person. You might gather the information from a lot of different people, but, please consider designating one person who writes well, and not only writes well, but gets engagement work, right? So that they can understand how to really write a beautiful story about all the wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because you want a uniform language throughout the application.
Excellent. So we're going to take a little bit of time to think about that team building and starting the application and thinking about what it might look like. So before we get into some breakout spaces, we're going to be dividing up into two groups. One group with Josh, one group with Lori, to start talking about, considering the process and thinking about a team. I'm going to go over the questions, and I'm also going to put a link in the chat to a nice handout that you can use today and use back on your campus to start thinking about that building out process. So some of the questions we're thinking about is building the team. Who might be in that group? Who are the different stakeholders in your campus? Who has the data? Who can collect it for you? Who are the voices and perspectives that you want to be at the table? Who are we like to sometimes talk about the campus historian, the person who's been there for a long time, that has the relationships, who knows the people, who's your community liaison? There's a lot of different types of people that you might want to get into the process. Who also might not be deeply informed or part of community engagement, but you might want to have buy-in for the process. So having them be part of this might help them learn more about your community engagement programming to kind of generate that buy-in. And then who do you also want to educate about this process? Those questions that we're going to probe a little bit, and then we're going to break out into teams. I'm going to throw the link into the chat as well here just real quick, so that we can get people, you can kind of work with that with Lori and Josh and just start to discuss the process a little bit.
And we'll be in breakout groups for about 10 minutes. So welcome back, folks. Hope you had a fruitful conversation those 10 minutes. So Lori, can you share with us a little bit about what came up in your group, or what some of the things that were raised? Oh, I think you're on mute.
So I was lucky enough to have a one-on-one with Deborah, which was really, really great. And to hear about the work that she's doing on her campus. And one of the things that, and Deborah, please jump in and comment on this as well. One of the things that came out is that, Deborah mentioned that they really are in the early throes of trying to do this work, and certainly they are under-resourced. But as we started to talk about, the different areas of the campus, and she described, who's doing what, it became clear that there are certainly areas to be tapped into for this application. And the key takeaway here is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren and Marisol, I suggested that when they do apply, because it might be too soon for them apply, but they're working towards it, that they should definitely describe the process that has been going on for the last, say, year or two to help them get to the point that they are applying. Who was involved, how many meetings, how many different initiatives were developed, and how many challenges they faced. Because as I explained, I was a reviewer and I've read applications where people talked about, how difficult it was for them to get to the point where they can apply. And many of those colleges did get classified. I think that there's no one size fits all, but if you're answering most of the questions in a very intentional and deep way, and it's so important to describe your process of what it took to get there, it's important.
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct, because you may answer no to something, but you can definitely describe where you're at in the process, and that's helpful to see that actually you may be at a no, but you're in process, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, you may be at a 3, but you're not at a 0 or at a 1. And so that's going to be, really key, because you want to make sure that you answer every question in the application.
Right. And I don't know, Deborah, if you want to add something. I thought we had a really nice conversation, and I was, excited about some of the things that you said. I don't know if you want to share something.
Well, thanks so much, Lori. I appreciate it, and everyone here. Yes, maybe I'll just mention the thing that's sort of top of my mind, because I just had this meeting with my new college president, Dr. Pedro Avila. And when we were talking about kind of framing and building a civic engagement program, which is my sabbatical project right now, it's something I'm thinking about a lot. And like Lori said, we do have lots of pockets of great work happening on our campus. It's just there's not an umbrella focus at this point. So Dr. Avila just said to me early in our conversation, I don't think students of color, who are the majority of our students, we're an HSI, a Latinx serving institution, relate to civic engagement. So, what they are relating to today, he said, is social justice. And we've been talking about, with the student government right now, he said things like building perhaps an intercultural social justice kind of center on campus. And perhaps that could be, and so that was fascinating to me. I'm so glad he was honest with me, but I'll just leave that there. That's just something about, and then Lori said, indeed, the literature does say that our students of color are underrepresented in civic engagement work. So it's just making me think, how do we invite our students of color in to this work, so that they don't, so that they know that this work is about them and everybody. It's inclusive.
Thank you. I'm happy to connect with you offline. My research is on Latinx community engagement at HSI, so we can talk some more. I'm happy to share some of the resources that I have with you. Josh, how about your group?
One thing we talked about was a good starting point is to do some type of a scan or survey campus-wide to identify what's currently going on as a foundation, as a starting point. And also, like, as far as evidence, again, question by question, each question asks for evidence. So who are the identified stakeholders for each question? What data is needed, who's doing what. Faculty buy-in is so important, but so is your executive leadership, your president. Both are so important. Without both of their buy-in, it would be impossible to do, I think. So those were a few things. If I had 3 other folks in my group, do any of you want to add anything I left out?
I think that, hi everyone. I think that was, that's kind of the core thing, Josh. That's really is, especially for me, what I was trying to explain is I'm the student trustee at College of the Canyon. So we're kind of working backwards, if you will. Cause I'm the majority of the stuff that I do is boots on the ground. So I think we have the data. It's a matter of forming a team now and what we can do with that. So finding those additional faculty members. Thank God I have someone amazing in Patty Robinson to lead the way, but putting together an awesome team through faculty and staff and potentially students as well, I think is going to help us get to these goals and answer these questions. So yeah, I appreciate Josh sharing some insight on that.
Thanks, and that's a perfect segue to Patty and the conversation that happened here in person.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate the comment. And I must say, I've got an amazing young man that I'm working with in Jesse. I couldn't be doing this work if it wasn't for him this year. So we had a great conversation. We have a team here that obviously is forming. We started thinking about what we have at this point and how we could start going through the questions, really taking what has been done, what's missing. So we sort of spent the 10 minutes strategizing sort of next steps. And I think that's going to be how we're going to approach this, really thinking, dissecting those questions, and at the same time figuring out who do we need to contact, what pieces are missing. And as we were talking, we started realizing we've done more than you think. And I think that's the comment I would make to everybody. Really start doing that deep dive into your own campus. And I think you're going to realize there's a lot of things that you've been doing, and maybe you just haven't framed them within the context of this kind of classification. Thanks, Barry.
Oh, clickers. Give us 1 minute. Moving to manual. Our campus don't have, so, this is a question or a comment that comes up quite a bit, but I think, both Josh and Lori talked about this. The website scans, right? Planning documents, press releases, contacting the heads of programs to contribute. So you don't have to do this alone. Think about where you can reach out to folks. Negotiating for a faculty course release for support on this, whether or not that's something that your institution, can do, or negotiating a stipend to hire a consultant. Josh mentioned these things, Lori mentioned these things, but these are sort of other areas to consider. So I just want to talk a little bit about our peer review process. I know that we've kind of mentioned this, but one of the things that, as we sort of looked at our own data that came up was our reviewers have typically been a smaller group of folks who've reviewed all of the applications that have come in. Some members of our National Advisory Committee have served as reviewers. Lori has. I have. Prior to joining the team, I was on the National Advisory Committee for the community engagement classification. But we really wanted this to be of and by the field. And one of the ways that we thought we could do this was creating a peer review process. So we're actually piloting it for this cycle. And that's part of the reason why we instituted an October 31st initiation date or purchase by date, so we can know how many applications we have in, so we can understand how many reviewers we need to recruit. We will be putting the call for reviewers out. The application will be out November 14th. It'll be open until December 14th. And then we'll select a group of reviewers. And we'll be doing trainings between January and March, as well as assigning review teams. Our hope is to have teams of 3 folks, all reviewing the same 7 to 10 applications. If they reach consensus, that's great. It moves on to us for our set of eyes on it. If they do not reach consensus, then it'll go to a senior review committee who will make the determination, and then our sets of eyes will be going on it. And then the review time will take place over the summer. So basically May 15th through September 1st. And we'll see how it goes. Right now we have about 90 applications that have been started. And so we're excited to see. Our hope is that those reviewers will be diverse backgrounds. We want graduate students. We want people who have applied before, have not. We see this as a professional development opportunity, especially for folks who are applying for the 2026 cycle. We've invited our colleagues who have launched or will be launching community engagement elective classifications in Australia and Canada to join us as reviewers so they can learn from our process. And it is a paid review process as well. So be on the lookout for that. We definitely want folks from community colleges. Our hope is that if there is a community college application coming through, then someone from a community college will be on the team to help, add to that context. The same thing with HBCUs and HSIs are targeted institutions. We've got tons of resources. So please look on our website. There was a book that came out based on the 2015 cycle, that talks about the elective engagement and just perspectives from folks who've done those. I have a chapter on there on how to build a team. Our website, again, has tons of resources, webinars, workshops, the application you can access. And again, we don't want the cost of the application to be a barrier for participation. And so campuses can request a fee waiver. All you have to do is send us an email and you got it. AC Engage. So this is our wonderful platform. One of the benefits of joining the American Council on Education is this AC Engage. So it's like a social media platform that really we're utilizing to bring together a community of applicant institutions. We post our events and activities on there. We do drop-in Q&As. You can crowdsource questions. You can share the resources that you are coming up with. We really want this to be a collaborative community effort as people are doing the application process. And we want this to be a space that continues to connect applicants even after the application cycle. And so we're looking to build and increase participation in this. The QR code, you can take your phones out and it'll direct you to the page to get signed up and access all the resources that we have on our AC Engage. So I'll leave that up for a minute or so folks can put it up.
So part of this, it asks you, if you're signing up right now, how did you learn about this platform? It's like kind of a going against bots. Put in that box Carnegie, and that helps our team in the back end to have support in this platform, enter you into the right program automatically. And they just let you know, they know that you're in the right place. And if you have if it doesn't work and you can't figure it out because then you're on your phone really fast, it's on our website as well on the home page. It says join AC Engage. You can click and kind of go from there. I think our final thing, so we at least for a second, is any questions that we have left. If you have any questions, I'll also be on the chat. We're a small group, so you can just feel free to get off your mic or maybe raise your hand and we can get any questions in that are left remaining for our last couple of minutes on the online component. And I'll make sure to read any of those questions on the chat as well. Josh.
So Lauren, I put a question in there and I haven't read the publication that Marisol just shared, so that's on me, I need to. But I've been working with a community college in Kansas City recently that wants to create a civic engagement center and is interested in earning the community engagement classification. But one thing that I've noticed is that it's just so hard because they're starting from ground zero, and I was just thinking, as I work with them or with any community college, if there were concrete examples of things that other community colleges are doing under each of these bucket areas, it might make it less intimidating for them. So I don't know if that exists or if there's, so is that something we could create? Because when I'm reading the questions, a lot of things come up in my mind, something we're already doing or something that we could do that maybe would be helpful to someone else.
Sure. So they're actually on our website, Lauren, put it up. There are some exemplar applications. So we ask permission from campuses who submitted in the past who had really strong applications, including community colleges, if we could share their application publicly. And so those are up on our website, and I think that might be a good place to start. One of the things, Josh and Lori and others, if this is of interest to you, we can host a space through AC Engage for those conversations with community colleges to kind of share best practices, the way that community engagement is organized on their campus, if that would be beneficial, particularly for that campus that you're working with that's interested but starting from ground zero. You can also, through AC Engage, like invite them to attend or participate, and they could crowdsource, put out the question, and folks will respond to that. So it's a good resource, but happy to sort of create a dedicated space for that conversation around community colleges through our AC Engage platform.
Any additional questions from our group online or in person? I didn't see any others in the chat.
So
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I don't have any questions, but before I don't have the chance, I want to thank all of you for putting this together and trying to keep community colleges together and at the forefront of this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. And as we're sort of doing shout outs, Fatma, can you come on screen? All right, folks, I want you to give virtual and in-person applause to Fatma. She has done an amazing job. She's the person behind the scenes making sure that we look good. So thank you, Fatma, for all your hard work and your partnership on making this happen.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marisol.
All right, with if nothing else, feel free to reach out to us, and thank you all for participating, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you, Laura.
Bye. Thank you.
Oh, wait.
I want to just remind everybody before you leave, next week, because this is all part of our Civic Dialogue series, remember next week, next Friday, we'll go back to our totally virtual presentation, but we have Bobby Lohr, who is the new president of Campus Compact. And as you all know, Bobby is doing just an amazing job revamping Campus Compact. So again, next Friday, 10 o'clock Pacific time, and we certainly hope you all will join us. And again, a big shout out to Marisol and Lauren for being here in person, and also thanks to all of you, and a big shout out to 3CSN, who has helped Kimberly and I really promote all of this. So thanks very much.
Thank you.